everyone, it's Anna. Welcome back. Today we are finally reviewing Legendborn, which is book one in the Legendborn cycle. Ordinarily, this wouldn't have been a book that I would have picked up, mostly because one, I don't read young adult anymore, and two, the fact that this is a contemporary urban fantasy. I don't typically read in these genres. They're just not books I would usually gravitate towards. However, this book has been on my radar for quite some time. So I do think I would have eventually gotten to it, but having the final book come out this month is what really pushed me towards it, especially with knowing just how popular this series is. That was the catalyst that sort of got me to pick up the series. I have to say that I'm actually really glad that I did end up picking it up, because this is a book that surprised me and I didn't expect to enjoy it just as much as I ended up enjoying it. Now, this is a take on the Arthurian legend, which I think that if tackled traditionally would have ended up being sort of your bog standard dragons, knights, people on horses, that kind of stuff. So I think that the author taking this very well known and very, in terms of the aesthetic and the trope, being quite a classic fantasy trope in and of itself, and sort of twisting it to what she made it, I think was a really great touch and a very interesting take on the story. So we are following our main character, who is Bree Matthews. She's a young black girl who's joined this early college program in University North Carolina Chapel Hill, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure that's correct. And so she's joined with her best friend, and the story gets kicked off pretty quickly in that she sees something magical happening and nobody else around her can see these things that are taking place, and there are people there that are like fighting these creatures. So that's kind of her first introduction to the secret society, which is the Legendborn. Now, a few months before she also joins this program, Bree loses her mother. So not only do we have her navigating this secret society, but she's also grieving in the book as well, which I think plays a part in not only the decisions that she makes, but also, I think, kind of as well, plays a part in the magic system. I won't be elaborating any further on that because I feel like it will be a bit of a spoiler, but I think the grief in this book is an integral part. I think the plot of this book is one of its strong points. Now, whilst I've said that I am not too big on contemporary or urban fantasy, the fact that it is part of this genre, I think, allows the author to just get stuck straight into the story, because within the first few pages, we are introduced to integral characters. We are, I think, just hooked straight away. And I knew that from those first few pages, I was going to enjoy it, which for me is very rare as somebody who just usually reads quite heavy and dense fantasy. There's a lot of world building usually involved because the author has to set up the world and tell you about all the constraints and all the things that's going on in this world. But this is an urban fantasy. You know what a university is, you know where North Carolina is, you know a lot of the key points. So it just kind of gets started straight away. And I think from beginning to end, it's just kind of action. It just gets going without very much let up. But that's not to say that the book is just action, action. Well, a little bit. I will elaborate. I think that what I do like about this book is that the plot keeps moving, but I think that the pacing is really good. I think it's done very, very well up to a point. I like that you still have action, the quiet moments when the characters get to know each other and talk to each other and build those connections with each other, I think work really well in the book. So in terms of the ups and downs and the pacing, I think the author does this really, really brilliantly. But I think with there being so much action within the book, there are certain aspects that I think do kind of get left behind, and I will touch upon this and elaborate on this a little bit later on in this review. All right, so let's talk about the romance, okay? Because I think this is where me being more of an adult reader kind of comes into play a little bit. Now, the author, I think, is trying to make a love triangle. There's definitely a romance connection between two characters, and I think she's trying to almost shoehorn a love triangle in there, which is very classic YA. And part of the reason why, again, I don't really love reading YA, because I don't care about a love triangle. I really don't. All right, give me a good slow burn between two characters that are really into each other. That's my vibe. However, I think that with one of the other love interests that she's trying to kind of shoehorn in there, this character, okay, is trying to kill the main character. And usually I eat that up. That is my vibe. I love a good enemies to lovers, okay? That is a trope that I live for, inject it into my veins. However, with these characters being young adult, okay, I think Brie is like 16, and I think the other character, I want to say he's either 17 or 18. I'm leaning towards more towards like 18. And like now it would ordinarily be enemies to lovers, right? Because he really hates her. Okay, he's really going for it. But I think that with them being young adults and with the power imbalance between the two characters, it comes across as bullying. And so when the author is trying to introduce this romantic connection, it just seems so out of place. Because yes, they kind of, I think, acknowledge that they never outright acknowledge that there is a connection between them, but you can kind of tell that they're kind of liking each other, right? But it doesn't make sense, and I think in the way it happens is a bit cringe because sometimes she'll be like, "Oh, he's so mean," but I think I'm kind of into it. Like it's just a bit cringe. I don't know. I'm not into it, and maybe it's because it's not a trope that is my vibe. I'm not a love triangle kind of gal. Okay, I'm not. So maybe that's what it is, but it feels very, very shoehorned in. I think we could do without it. I want to talk about the characters and also the world building in this because I kind of feel like in this instance it kind of goes hand in hand. So we obviously have Brie, who's our main character. She is very headstrong, and like I mentioned at the start, she is also grieving. So a lot of the things that she is doing within the story is being powered by her grief, and she is associating herself with the Legendborn in order to get to the bottom of what I think it starts off being, or I guess the author tries to make a mystery. So she believes that her mother's death wasn't actually an accident because she has memories that come back to her. I think after the first magical instance that she has memories that come back to her, and she realizes that perhaps the Legendborn were involved in some way, shape, or form in her mother's death. So, which is why she kind of really tries to get into the Legendborn and sort of understand what their society is about because something's afoot. She feels something's fishy, and she needs to know. I think that oftentimes when you have these kinds of characters who are so headstrong and just run into things just head first, it can be a little bit frustrating. But I think where we have Brie, who is going through a lot of things, who hasn't really processed her grief, it makes sense. Her actions make sense. And so I found that I, as a reader, was able to give her a lot of grace in the actions that she took because it's a crazy situation that she's in to see all this magic and see all this stuff and perhaps finding out that your mother's death wasn't an accident like you originally thought it was. I think that her actions made sense. I also can't help but feel though that some of my feelings right now are being influenced by the fact that I am some way through book 2. So where I gave her grace in book 1, I'm kind of like side-eyeing a little bit in book 2, but that's fine. On the whole, her actions make sense. And then we have the Legendborn, which are the descendants of the Knights of the Round Table. The name of what they called them, Scion. There we go. So you have the scions of Lancelot, scions of, I don't remember the other names of the knights, but you have their descendants. And then within that, you have other people. Now, I will say, right, that this is where I was probably most confused in the story because we get introduced to these characters in a very short space of time. And then we also get introduced to the hierarchy and I guess a little bit more of the magic system as well, again, during that point as well. And I have to say, I don't know if it was just me, but it just felt really confusing to the point where I just said to myself, do you know what? If it's important, it will come back up later on because I can't be asked to try and keep everything straight. Now, annoyingly, I didn't realize until I was way over the halfway point of the story that there is a glossary and the author has like laid out like who is who, who's what. But for some for some people within the Legendborn, they have several different names for like one sort of person. And it was very confusing. You had pages, you had lieges, you have scions, you have the regents, you have merlins. Like, so the merlins are like the bodyguards. There's different levels of merlins, I believe, but you have one that is for the crown King Arthur's scion, and then you have like other merlins for other people. There's a lot of people doing different things. There's a lot of moving parts within this organization, which I think can be a little bit confusing. I did sort of understand it a little bit more as the story went on, because I was like, we'll figure it out, we'll get there. And I think it didn't quite solidify in my brain until I started reading the second book, and then everything kind of sort of clicked into place from that point. But I think just beware, because that for me was a little bit confusing. If you got it straight away, well done, because I was straight over my head. The magic system, I would say, was really cool, and I did like it a lot. I don't think I can go into too much detail because I wonder if it might be a bit of a spoiler. However, I would say that I like when authors have magic systems that have consequences, right? So oftentimes when you have those characters who are the best of the best, the strongest that ever lived, and whatever it might be, that's boring. It's so boring. But having a magic system that has this really big knock-on effect that affects the characters in a really big way, I really enjoy it, because I think having those limitations really adds to the plot, especially when they have to use this magic. You know that when they are sacrificing themselves, it makes it all that more meaningful to me personally. Now, this is set in a school, but the main character has next to no interactions with the school setting, which was a little bit confusing. I don't understand why, because it's almost like we didn't really need the school to be introduced to the secret society, which then had me thinking, was this originally supposed to be an adult book? And then we aged them down, or the author had to age them down, and then had to find a way for the character meeting the secret society to make sense. Because Brie Neri attends a class, okay? I think she attends them. There's no real discussion in the book with her studies, except that she's not doing too hot because she's so busy with like grieving and the secret society stuff. I just found it really odd, and I don't know if anybody else, or it struck anybody else, that we had this setting, this very specific setting where we would meet a secret society, but there's like no interaction with it at all. Now, this may be because of how fast-paced the book was, and perhaps the author just wanted to focus on the secret society aspect, which is fair enough. But I think because of that, a lot fell to the wayside. Now, essentially, with this book, and I'm going to go into what is probably my biggest gripe of the story, this is a story that is about a black girl. Her blackness plays a lot within this book. Brie has a lot of experiences with racism, a lot of microaggressions, macroaggressions. It is very much pointed out within the story. She is entering a secret society, which is very much a white secret society. It is talked about a lot, but she's going full steam ahead with integrating herself with this secret society. Now, for a book that is so very pointedly aimed at black people and aimed towards black people, there is a very distinct lack of black people within this book, especially with Brie's interactions as well. Now, this is a point of contention for me, and I just feel like it's quite a large point of contention. Where Brie is forging connections with certain characters within the Legendborn, the black characters that she comes into contact with and that she meets through present day, and that she finds out about in terms of like the past and historically, a lot of them are just used as catalysts within the story. Brie doesn't really forge any meaningful connections with any black characters. And I think that when you have so many microaggressions in the book and so much racism, like, I think like sometimes I'm just like, damn, like she's really unlucky, because as a black woman, I've experienced microaggressions. I know what it looks like. It's a lot, but I have my best friend to speak to, and we will rift off each other. We will talk about these things, and then it releases that annoyance and tension. But when you have that safety net to talk to, right? Bree doesn't really ever have that. The black people are just used to tell her about her history and as a way to get her moving and moving the plot along. I didn't love that. And so I feel that where the author didn't have her interacting with the school, it meant that she didn't really interact with other students. Now, whether or not this was intentional, because obviously she was grieving, she was very one track minded in trying to find the mystery of her mum's death. Makes sense. So perhaps it was the case where the author didn't really prioritize her creating and forging relationships outside of the Legendborn and also her best friend who she already have. I get that. However, with so much racism taking place in the book, it lacks balance when the main character goes through so much of these issues and doesn't have a really adequate support system. That was my thing, because I think for me as a black woman reading it, I think at times it just felt jarring. It felt jarring and it felt tiring. And I'm not one who just like, I don't want to read about racism in my fantasy. Like, it's what it is. She is in the South. She's in North Carolina. The fact that she's experiencing these microaggressions and this racism makes sense. The friends that she made within the Legendborn are great. I love William. Great character. Love him down. But it's very much addressed as being people who don't understand what she's going through. They will never be able to understand what she's going through. Race and racism plays such a big part into not only the plot, the backstory, and also the magic system within the book, that I am a little bit confused at the sheer lack of black people. I logically would think that at some point within the book, she would commune with these other characters because there are other magic users who are similar to the Legendborn, but it's more African American in terms of the practices and the history of this particular magic. And to me, logically, Bree forging those relationships with those other characters would counteract some issues that she's currently having. But so far, in book two, even in book two, that isn't addressed yet. Whether or not it's going to be addressed later on in the book, or perhaps even in book three, I don't know, which is why it's my biggest gripe so far with the book. So on the whole, I will say that even with the gripes that I had, this was a story that I enjoyed thoroughly. And I kept thinking to myself as I was reading that if this book had come out when I was a teen, I would have eaten up that love triangle. Give me more. That would have been my vibe, honestly, because that was what I was on when I was a teen. But it would have also been my whole entire personality, because I know that it would have been a story that I related to so very much. Like, obviously, reading it as an adult now, I have my criticism, but this is why representation is so important, because I know I would have just loved this series as a young adult. So folks, that was my review of Legendborn. Let me know what your thoughts are if you have read this, if you loved it, if you agree, disagree, if there's anything you think I have missed out on my review. Let me know below and I will see you guys all in my next video. Bye.